So, moving on to today's session, we're going to explore how the power of play can be used to help people engage with pensions and long-term financial planning in a more accessible and meaningful way. So, Scottish Widows is using game design to educate, motivate, and empower customers to take positive action towards their financial future. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Myrid Simpson, Rose Ulda-Mullins, and Lily McNally, who are going to take us through behind the scenes of this work. From understanding customer needs and designing the experience through to testing, launching, and using data and customer feedback to continually improve the game. So the presentation today should last about 45 minutes, and then we'll have around 15 minutes at the end for questions. So if you have got any questions, just pop them in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to those at the end. You don't have to wait till the end to ask your questions. So if a question comes up, pop it in and we'll get to that at the end. We'll answer them all together at the end. So that's everything from me. I'll hand you over to Myrid just now, and then I'll see you at the end.
Fantastic. What an intro. Thank you. And you absolutely nailed the pronunciation of our names, which is definitely easier said than done. So yeah, thanks to everyone for joining us today, especially at lunchtime. I hope you have got either something tasty to eat or drink whilst you're listening into this. So before we get into the case study, I am just going to share a bit about where we work and our purpose, and we'll also introduce ourselves and give you a bit more context on how we work together to unlock better outcomes for the population of the UK. So before we get into this Venn diagram, which I got very excited about creating on Monday this week, I'm going to talk to you a bit about where we work. I have tried to do this on various occasions with friends and family over the last 7 years, and they still look a bit confused. So hopefully you can follow what I'm about to say, and hopefully you find it helpful. So we work for Lloyds Banking Group, which is actually in customer terms the biggest retail bank in the UK, serving 28 million customers, which is 40% of the UK population, which is quite something. So huge scale there. Now, within Lloyds Banking Group, there are various different businesses, all focused on different things. And we sit within the Scottish Widows business. And within Scottish Widows, what we're really focused on is helping people to secure their tomorrow. So to better their financial future and protect all of the things that matter to them whilst they are on that journey to retirement. So our team, which we are representing here today, is an amazing team of around 20 people sitting across the product design and engineering disciplines. And my role within that is a product lead, so focusing typically on finding that really sweet spot between tackling customer needs and helping people better prepare and save for their future, whilst also unlocking business value. Something I think that is often easier said than done, but a really rewarding challenge. If we've got anyone from games industry on the call, I think the closest reference point is probably a producer, from what I understand. And I think over and above the core function of their role, one thing that I worked really closely with Rose and Lily on is just creating a culture that's conducive to experimenting and creativity, which is what we'll really shine a light on today as part of the case study. So I'm going to hand over to Lily now for a bit of an intro and insight into what she does.
Hello, what a fab intro, Myra. Thank you. So my name's Lily. I'm the design lead for the Scottish Widows app, and I've been working in industry for about 10 years, so across civil service, banking and agency. And if I was going to sum up design and what it's all about, at its core, it's about being obsessed with solving problems. It's about being really curious and using that curiosity to drive innovation. And people, it is so much about the people. So not just our users, it's about how we create things with our teams and also our stakeholders. And I think this Venn diagram is beautiful because it shows the really close and collaborative relationship that we have between design, product and engineering. So I'm going to hand off to my fellow flower sister, Rose.
Thanks, Lily. So my name's Rose and my role is the engineering lead for games and gamification. So the two teams that MyRed looks after from a business perspective, I look after from a tech perspective. So all of the wonderful ideas that Lily and MyRed come up with, it's my job to work out how we can make those happen. That's been really exciting in this team because we've introduced 2 new technologies that were new to Lloyds Banking Group, and that's really enabled us to create these kind of interactive journeys and full games. So that's been super exciting. I then manage 14 people within the team. We've got all different types of engineers, API, quality engineers, mobile engineers, games developers. So I manage those and also the deployment process. So how does it go from something on somebody's laptop to getting out there into the public world?
Amazing. So before we get into our case study, I am going to talk a bit more about our purpose. If any of you on the call happen to know either Rose, Lily, or myself, what you will know is that we are huge empaths and really purpose-driven. And that's something we share in common with a lot of our teams. So the stats on the slide here really light the fuel in our tummies, or the fire in our tummies, and make us so passionate about what we do. So in 2026, Great Britain, over 50% of people are on track to receive the below minimum standard of living at the point when they get to retirement. And 47% of people are saving in cash, which is actually quite interesting because what it demonstrates is that they have an appetite to save and prepare for their future, but they don't have the knowledge or motivation to save in a way that really will maximize their return on that money. Then when it comes to the picture around advice and access to advice, it is particularly bleak. So there is a real financial barrier to accessing professional financial advice in the UK today, with only 6% of people able to do so and motivated to do so. So there's a huge, big advice gap on a topic that is really overwhelming and bamboozling for many, many people. And that bottom stat on the screen is something that makes me especially angry, and I channel that anger into the work that I do. That as we sit here today, women who retire will retire with £113,000 less than men. And another way to position that is that for a woman to retire with the same pension pot as a man, they would need to start saving into that pension from 7 years old, which makes me very emotional as a mum to a 2-year-old. But the good thing is we are doing something about it. And within our work, we're taking a really different approach to engaging people in a way that we hope will have impact and inspire action. So if we move on to the next slide, I'm going to talk a bit about why games and how games can really solve that societal challenge that we have. Now, I was speaking to a work experience group yesterday, and this was the first question one of them asked. You're in a bank. Why are you building games? And I also asked that myself when I joined this team, and I've been on a journey to really understand the science behind it, and it makes so much sense to me now, and hopefully it will to you too after you hear this. So over and above the backdrop and the purpose that I just spoke about, we have also got a situation where we have really low financial literacy in our population. People are not growing up learning about the basic financial skills that they need to survive and thrive in adulthood. Coupled with a real lack of confidence, people second guess themselves and therefore really feel crippled when it comes to making decisions and taking action. Then you overlay the digital burnout that is endemic in society today, with over 70% of people I'm one of those, reporting that they feel the strain of digital, the always-on society, and the overwhelm that that can create. So where do games come in then? In the context of people's future and financial decisions, it becomes really difficult for people to take action today because the benefits that you will unlock from action today might not be felt for decades in the future. So if you're 20 years old in your first job, deciding between investing in your pension or going out at the weekend when you wouldn't get your pension for potentially 50 years, drives people towards living for today rather than making that investment in their future. And as an industry, how we've been trying to get people to take action historically is by using lots of jargon, lots of complicated words, and loads of heavy paragraphs of text. And we're expecting people to come to us, find this jargon, and then take action, which is really pretty crazy when you think about it. So what games can do is they can really make the subject and the topic accessible and actionable for all, irrespective of your background or of your level of financial knowledge and confidence. So they reduce cognitive overload. They really draw you in. So they're very active in how you participate, which means that you're not only more likely to then take action after engaging with a game or gamified experience, you're more likely to recall what you learned in the future. And they're also really effective for sustaining engagement. And we'll talk a bit about what we've learned and some of the data that we've got on that as we go into the case study. So before we delve further into what we have done, I just wanted to touch a bit about the difference between games and gamification, and we'll bring this to life in our context just shortly. So gamification on the left-hand side, which we've referenced using the example of Duolingo, which is where you see little subtle elements from games showing up in non-game contexts. So Duolingo are considered to be industry leaders in this, but actually it's all around us. So lots of fitness apps use these techniques. Octopus Energy is another household name that's really great at this stuff. Then on the right, in the middle of the spectrum, we've got serious games, which is where you have games that are based on trying to educate and teach people about a specific topic. So they've got a core purpose that's at the heart of them. And the example we've got here is Microsoft Flight Simulator, where you've got the really important job of teaching people how to fly a plane, and the application of a game to help do that. And then on the right-hand side, a game that we've had to take a break from in my family for the time being because my 5-year-old thought we were going to find real-life Pokemon, is Pokemon Go, which is amazing. It's such a fun game which gets people out and about, but that game is really built purely for the purposes of entertainment. So on the next slide, you will see loads of different things. And this is just a snapshot into how we are applying both games and gamification in our work. There's also a pretty little animation that pops up for women in retirement, which is delightful because it's something we're so passionate about. Today, we're going to be double tapping onto Drive to Thrive as our case study. But if you're curious about any of these things, or games and gamification more generally, we can pick that up in the chat at the end. So I think at this point, I'm going to be passing the baton over to Rose to introduce the case study.
Thanks very much, Myred. So I thought it was important before we kind of delve into Drive to Thrive to tell you the origin of where it started, because it's something that we're all incredibly proud of. So Myred touched on what we're facing in the pensions and investments industry when it comes to gender equity. So women retire with £113,000 less than men. 50% of women do not feel like investing is for them. Interestingly, when women do invest, they tend to invest better than men. And women are far less likely to use digital planning tools than what men are. So that's what me, Lily, and Myred are trying to combat within the industry. But we also work within the tech industry, and there's still a gender equality that goes on within tech that I'm sure everyone's aware of. So the other problems that they face is that for every young woman studying computer degrees in the UK, there is 4.1 young men. So that pipeline starts really early with the uneven gender split. Women only account for 21% of IT specialists in the UK. And the number of girls interested in STEM increases when they have role models. So it's actually 41% when they have a role model, and it's only 26% without. So what we wanted to do is to tackle those two challenges, and we did so as part of Ada Scotland Festival. So if anyone's based in Scotland, we're doing loads of events with them later in the year, and their aim is to increase gender diversity in STEM subjects. So what we wanted to do is we ran a game jam. And if people don't know what that is, it's similar to a hackathon. You basically get a load of people in a room for a couple of days, you put them in teams, you give them a challenge, and then they spend 2 days building it together, and there's a judging panel that choose their favourite one. So we ran one of these as part of the festival, open to women and non-binary people. And we gave them the challenge to create a game or gamified journey to help close the gender gap in pensions and investments. So quite a big ask of them. But we then wanted to give back to the students. So the winning prize would receive a career boost package. And as part of that, we would take their idea forward and release it for International Women's Day. So that's exactly what we did. So this is animated versions of the winning Game Jam team. It was a group of 4 female students from Heriot Watt that was studying computer science. They had never built a game before. The majority of them had not used the technology React that they built the game in the day, so it was incredibly impressive. And their game was based around it being Jenny's first day in the office. So it was this concept that Jenny goes around the office, she interacts with women that have different experiences to her that are maybe a little bit later in life, and they teach her things along the way. There was interactive objects that she could interact with to increase knowledge, for example. But the key message of their game was that we can learn so much from the women around us. And that can be through conversation, through giving knowledge, and then also gaining it in return. And interestingly, that was the International Women's Day theme last year, which was give to gain. So the judges absolutely love their idea and really love the concept. So how did we go from an office to an open road, you might ask? So what we did is we thought about the key concepts that we really loved about their idea. So it had a focus on building knowledge and confidence through a guided learning journey. We love the inclusion of a progress bar for this kind of personal growth or growth of knowledge. Using gamification within a wider game kind of sustains engagement because you can see it moving up. We love the fact that there was interactive objects and collectibles and that they impacted your gameplay, and that made learning more engaging and memorable. The biggest one was a strong emphasis on learning from women who have already been through the experience, and we kept Jenny as the main figure in Drive to Thrive, and finally making an unfamiliar topic feel more approachable. So they only had 2 days to do their prototype. As I said, they had never built a game before, and we had just introduced a new technology called Unity to Lloyds Banking Group, which is a games engine, and it's actually what Pokemon Go was built with. So that kind of shows the breadth of what you can do with Unity. And the girls that won the Game Jam had actually said that they'd tried learning Unity before. It's quite a steep learning curve. You probably need a games degree to be able to use it. That's why they'd gone with something simple, but they also really wanted to try out a different game mechanic rather than just kind of walking around the office. So we knew that was one we wanted to do. We also wanted to change the location. So their story was based around it being someone's first day in the office, but we know that our journeys are relevant to people of all ages. So we didn't want to exclude anyone. We didn't want to focus on the start of their career. And we also wanted to come up with a really good analogy. So our research has shown that when you abstract something, it can make it more engaging and easier to understand. And the office was hard to get an analogy because it's quite literal in what it was. So we also wanted to change the scene to make that fit in. So although the setting and the game mechanic changed, both the game that they came up with and Drive to Thrive share the same core ambition. And that's helping customers learn, grow and prepare for their future through an engaging, story-driven experience. I'll pass on to Lily in just a second, but I just wanted to say that journey that we went on, we did not go it alone. Like I said, as part of their prize, we took their game forward, but we also mentored them and supported them in their careers. So top left, you can see is the day that they won the game jam, lots of smiling faces with the judging panel. Then bottom left is the first time they came into our Edinburgh office and they got to trial out the early prototypes of the games, see what people thought of them, and most importantly, we got feedback from them along the way of what we were building. The top middle one, which is my favourite picture because Myred has an amusing cone on her head, was a really proud moment. We actually went out to their university and showed their friends, fellow students, the game and got thoughts and feedback from there. At the bottom, you can see us in the Dundee office together. So another office they visited. This was a little bit later, again, giving feedback and play testing for us. Probably the proudest moment is the top right. So when we released it on International Women's Day, we ran an event at our office, our head office, and they actually did a panel event where they spoke about their experiences, and it was incredible and everyone loved it. And you could tell like how much they'd got out of this experience. And then bottom right, you can see we run some tech conferences internally called Reboot, and we actually invited them along to that. They got to go to career workshops, visit stalls, and listen to some really good technical talks as well. So that is the journey with the winning team. I'm now going to pass on to Lily, who's going to talk through the design journey that we went on.
Amazing. I love seeing those pictures. They always give me the feels. So ready, set, design. I'm going to take you on the journey from the game jam through to developing those concepts and how we had finalised designs that we worked with Rose's team, engineering, to get live. So if we just flip on to the next slide. So design method. The really interesting and also complicated thing about design is that the solution could be anything, because the important thing with design is to start with a problem, not a solution. So for this problem, as Rose and Myred have already mentioned, it's systemic. It's the outcome that women retire with £113,000 less than men. But you can imagine there are infinite ways that you could start to lean into that problem. There's not one solution to that singular problem. And I think for me, that's the key to design. So you don't start with the idea of an end solution. You start by being super curious about this problem that's in front of you. And actually feeling curious about a problem can feel a little bit unstructured, a bit disorientating and a wee bit overwhelming. Like, has anyone here ever stared at a blank sheet of paper in fear? That's a little bit what looking like a problem that you don't know how to solve feels. So we have a bit of a method to kind of ground and orientate ourselves. And this is what you can see on the screen now. So all of our work, no matter what it is, no matter what the problem is, it flows through this diagram. There's kind of 4 triangles around the outside of what I think looks a little bit like a Spider-Man mask. I'm not going to touch on those. I'm going to touch on the double diamond in the middle. So explore is our first one. That's where we always start. We understand what matters. So what's the problem? Why is the problem that way? What's driving it? What's everything that we could possibly know about this problem? So we obsess over it. And define, the next one. This is where we start to think about different ways that we could maybe solve that problem. So it could be a game. It could be a tool. It could be a page on a website. It might not even be digital design. It could be an event or a new operational process. But if you know the problem inside and out, you're ready to start looking at the right ways to solve it. Create is when, I think by this point, we're usually feeling pretty good. We've chosen the right solution to solve the problem, and we're really starting to bring that to life. So if it does end up being digital design, if that's the solution we're going after, this is where we're starting to go, right, well, what's the narrative? What's the flow? What's the visuals? All of this starts to get sharper within Create. And we test and we iterate and we test and we iterate until we're super confident that what we're about to put out into the world is going to have impact. And then deliver, finally, that's where we work hand in hand with engineering to make sure what we've created in Figma, which is the design tool that we use, it matches the final thing that will be in the customer's hands as closely as possible. So if we go on to the next slide. And here you can see us exploring. So this is some live action shots from the game jam, and quite the power stance from one of our brilliant graduate designers, E there. At this stage, Rose and Myrid had simply laid out the problem to the participants of the game jam. And each individual team here was exploring a multitude of ways to solve it. You won't believe the amount of ideas that came out of that session. There were so many ways to solve that problem. This stage can feel exciting, but it can also feel a bit messy and a bit daunting. But this is where the deep thinking really, really happens. So, sometimes when we have exploration workshops, my brain literally feels sore after them. And I think that's how you know that you've done it right. As Myrid had already mentioned, and Rose had mentioned, the winning team was a young group of female students from Heriot Watt. And the concept was focused around the power of women passing down wisdom and supporting one another with life events and barriers that women uniquely face. So the original narrative, as Rose had mentioned, it was all based around a woman's first day in the office. And this is where you're going to see how fluid design really is in those early stages. And that's where I'm going to take you on the journey from office to open road. So if you go into the next slide. Once we had the winning idea, we now needed to understand how we were tangibly going to bring it to life. So the nucleus of the idea was absolutely spot on. It's women navigating barriers, women passing on wisdom and knowledge about how they handled life events that impacted them financially. The office setting from the original concept, as Rose said, because it was quite literal, it was different to get like a narrative or an analogy going with that. So we stripped that narrative overlay back and we really honed in on those three things that were the nucleus of the original idea. So the navigating barriers, recognising that women's finances are shaped by life events, and women passing on knowledge. And somewhere within that cold January workshop on the 5th floor penthouse of Dundee, we had a bit of a light bulb moment. And that narrative of driving and that structure, it just sort of clicked. We even got so far as to start thinking about how we might name the game by the end of the day. And I don't know if you two both remember Fast and Financially Curious, but as I was pulling these slides together, it definitely made me giggle. If we jump on to the next one, now we are going to dive into Define. So with Define, it's really understanding like what are the ways that we can meet what matters. So what are the ways that we can kind of solve that problem? We're moving into kind of low fidelity wireframing at this point. So now it was time for us to define exactly how we were going to take our problem from office to road. We know that was the direction that we wanted to go in, but we kind of needed to feel that out a little bit. To start, there are different types of games. We decided it was going to be a kind of road analogy, but is it a runner? Is it a puzzle? Is it a collector game? We didn't know at this point. But by starting to sketch things out, and this doesn't need to be done in Figma or design software, we often draw things with pen and paper at this stage. And by starting to do that, sketching that out, we quickly realised that we needed a runner game, but not an endless one that went on forever without a timer. We needed to be able to collect things along the way on the road, and we needed to be able to store points related to the things that the player was collecting or avoiding. And we also needed to be able to share different characters' life experiences at the end of the game. This stage where we're sketching, it also helped us figure out what the barriers and boosts within the game would be as well. So you can start to see like little images cropping up where you've got this kind of road barrier, you've got a little pothole, and these will become more defined as we start to go on with the rest of the slides. Rose, on to create is the next one. Now we were feeling confident about the road analogy, which is great, and also confident about the game mechanics. We knew it wanted to be a runner, and we had to collect stuff, and it couldn't be an endless runner. But what we needed to do is spend that creative time to really bring this to life. So we refined it down to 3 barriers. I think when we started, we had about like 7 or 8. It was a huge list. We're feeling quite overwhelmed about it, but we managed to really synthesize it down to 3 barriers that reflect some of the systemic barriers that women face throughout their working life that lead to that £113,000 gender pension gap. And we also decided on one game boost. So that's the toolkit there. Each had its own image, and our amazing designer, Rachel White, worked really closely with brands, because obviously we have a Scottish Widows brand that is looked after centrally. So we need to work really closely with brands to get the art direction spot on. We also started to bring these characters to life. So we decided that we wanted each character to be linked to a specific barrier, which you can see on the screen here. Each of them are linked to one of these barriers. And what we wanted to do here is make sure that the characters could share their wisdom on how they navigated those barriers at the end. So that's why you've got characters kind of linked to the barriers. And yeah, I think you can really see here how the original game jam concept is still driving this, like that passing on of wisdom from one woman to the next. And once we kind of nailed this character to barrier logic, Rachel started bringing our diverse cast to life. And then our brilliant Dr. Amy Roger, she's not going to be happy that I dropped the doctor there, our researcher, tested the design multiple times. And this is really, really important. Like, we test and we iterate and we test and we iterate until we're super confident that what we're going to release into the world is going to have meaningful impact. If we jump on to the next one. Deliver. So our very first International Women's Day game, this was such a moment. Here it is, the finished game. So it's a fun and interactive experience that encourages users to avoid the barriers and collect confidence. So if you grab the toolkit, you're collecting confidence, and actually it turns your car into a flying car that shoots confetti out of its backside, which is delightful. We've also got a framing of those barriers in the context of life events unique to women, and you've also got women passing on knowledge to one another. With all of this, we worked super closely with engineering. We had never designed a game for Unity before. It was super uncharted waters. So actually, it did feel like a beautifully collaborative and creative effort to get this over the line. I'll just show you some of the screens in a wee bit more detail before I pass over again. So the game can kind of be split into three main parts. So the play part, the learn part, and the act part. So play, like, this is all about you are avoiding the barriers which reflect the systemic barriers that women face when it comes to finances, and you want to collect confidence points. At the end, you're going to have an opportunity to see the things that you managed to avoid and also the things that you managed to collect on the road. And there's an option to tap on each one of those characters to learn more about the barriers women face when it comes to money. We also had a way to collect feedback, which is really important because we want to measure effectiveness. And this is about really making sure that we are actually solving that problem rather than just assuming that we've had impact. If we go into learn, the next one. So, from the original Game Jam idea, this is all about women learning from other women. That a real force for change, I believe, comes from, I think women have this unique ability to build community and share knowledge with one another. I do think it's a bit of a superpower that we have. So we really leaned on that here. So depending on the barriers and the confidence collected in the game, you'll be able to see a woman's real story related to each one of those barriers. Fun fact, Jenny came from the original Game Jam, Jenny's first day in the office, and Lily may or may not have been named after a slightly eccentric, tall and loudly feminist design lead, but who knows. On to Act, my final slide before I hand over. So this is a view of that knowledge sharing page, but it's on desktop because we did this for app and also for web. What was really important for us is that the game and the knowledge sharing are hosted on Power Up, and this is a public web page that the games and gamification team own. And this means that the game is going to be able to be played by everyone, so not just people who have a Scottish Widows product. For International Women's Day, we wanted everyone to have access to this. It was really important to us because it was about reaching a really wide audience of women. We want to help every woman understand the systemic barriers that we face, how to navigate those, and also how to get the support that you need to make sure that you end up with the retirement that you deserve. Like, I firmly believe that we all work so hard, and women typically carry the load for others. So we fundamentally deserve to have a nice time in retirement, I reckon. So our mission is to help women get there. And I am now going to hand over to my best engineering pal, Rose.
Thanks, Lily. So I'm just going to chat you through a few things that we did to take a new route on the engineering side. So as I said, we just introduced Unity, which is a games engine, and it was the first ever Unity game that we've released within Lloyds Banking Group, which we're super proud of. It didn't come without its challenges when you introduce a new technology. It's a lot of learning as you go, but we managed to do it, and it just took 8 weeks actually from that initial session that we had to have something live in production, which is crazy fast compared to other things that we've done in the past. The massive one for me was, as Lily said, engineering and design working iteratively alongside each other. So usually what will happen is a designer will design something in Figma, but it'll be a really wonderful prototype that's a finished product pretty much by the time an engineer picks it up, and then they're just replicating what the designer's created. This wasn't that at all. It was literally a designer sat with an engineer, adding assets in, rebuilding it, testing it, making it harder, making it faster, and really working together on that. And I think that was incredible to see. And everyone always says how much our teams just feel so nice because everyone's kind of working together. There's no split in the teams between, what you do as a role. The early play testing of very, very rough prototypes was incredible. So we got a prototype working, we ran around the office, we got people to try it, we worked out how difficult it was, whether they were managing to get to the finish line, and then we just kept improving it based on that feedback. That's something that we've absolutely loved being able to do, is play testings really early with colleagues. We introduced our first soundtrack, so we're going to put a QR code up for the game later. Just be warned, it does play out loud. We have a sound engineer in the team called Ross, and he made a soundtrack for the game, which is the first one again, and we've continued to do that in our future games. And we also use a lot of the features that come from Unity. So the wonderful confetti that Lily mentioned, it's using a particle system built into Unity. We had animations in there for when the car swerves. We used physics for when it crashes into something and it slows down. And the really key one is that you've got variables in there so you can balance difficulty. So what we could do is get 100 people to play it, realize it's too difficult, and within a few seconds make it easier. So from that, you can change the speed, the amount of levels, the amount of collectibles that show up, the amount of barriers. And it was really exciting to kind of see that come to life as we developed it. The other two things that are really exciting, because we've used Unity, is on the bottom left. You can't actually see in his hand, but he's holding a controller, so like one that you'd use on a games console. So he managed to get Drive to Thrive hooked up to a controller. That's actually increased engagement a lot at events because it just feels a bit more exciting than, having videos that can really interact with it. And then hot off the press, what we've been doing for the last couple of weeks, or what Ross has been doing, is getting the steering wheel working with the game. So we've now managed to do that. So hopefully if you see it as an event, you'll be able to actually drive the car with a proper steering wheel and not just on the controller. So I'll talk you briefly through our road to release. So what you can see on the left is when we all got together that day in Dundee and what we mocked up on the whiteboard. We had just had a new games developer join us called Jake, and unfortunately for Jake, but fortunately for us, he had not accrued enough holidays so that when everyone went off for pretty much 2 weeks over Christmas, Jake worked through. But what we actually came back to was so impressive. So the picture that you can see, second one in, is what Jake had built in just a couple of weeks. Now, a lot of that is because Jake is an incredible games developer, but also it's everything that comes out of the box with Unity. It's the fact that these patterns already exist for runner games, the fact that he can change it so easily meant that the development time was so much shorter than other things that we've seen. The next one you can see is when he started working with Rachel to drop assets in. They weren't quite, the same aspect ratio, but you can kind of see it coming to life and how you can feel our kind of brand coming through there. And then what I'll do, I'll play the video, which is a demo of it. So it's got a small how to play at the beginning. We have since introduced a tutorial to explain the swiping mechanism. So on a mobile, you swipe left and right. On a keyboard, you're using the keys. And we've got a tutorial now that shows the first time you play it to make sure people can understand that. As you can see, we're collecting those collectibles. On the top, you can see the confidence bar growing, the more positive things that you collect. and it drops the more you hit the barriers. We really wanted to keep that from the initial game as well. We've got a timer on it. As Lily said, we didn't want it to be endless, so they've got 60 seconds to get to the finish line. It does get more difficult, so we tried different things. One was it going the same speed all the time. One was it getting, slower. Like, we kept trying different things. And the thing that we found most engaging to people is as you're doing better, it actually speeds up and things get a little bit faster. It's quite funny when we demo at events because people sort of end up screaming by the end of it because it is quite fast. And then at the end, they get the boost where they can fly over the finish line. So this is the journey map that we've got created. As Lily said, it dips into all the characters' stories so they can go on and read about those really important stories from other women. We also added the feedback that Lily showed earlier. This is because we wanted to, it's our first ever game that we've built and we wanted to see if people had enjoyed it. So that was massively important. The sound you can turn off on the screen if it does get a bit loud or if you're playing it in the office. And the interesting thing is the character that someone selected, when they go on to the next page, that is the information that they'll see at the top. So this page at the end with all the information is dynamic based on that person and the experience that resonated with them. So that's allowed us to put a lot of information on this page, but the most relevant information will go to the top. And each one has various tools and information that will help a woman in that particular aspect of pensions and investments. So we'll show you some of the stats because they're quite exciting. So it's been played over 4,000 times. It's actually probably a lot more than that because when we show it at events, it doesn't count towards our analytics, and it's been played hundreds of times at those. 52% of drivers reach the finish line. We still go back and tweak it, make it easier and harder. It doesn't mean that they can't get to the information at the end, though. They can choose to play again, or they can choose to interact with the characters, even if they don't get to the end. We didn't want to make it too easy for people either, because there is a high score element in it that we've seen people sharing. 60% of people played it on mobile, 40% on desktop. So like Lily said, we've got two versions of it. On the map engagement, we have seen pretty much even spread of people clicking the characters. It's interesting that Jenny is the most popular character and she's the one from the original Game Jam, which we love, but people are interacting with them. We also made a design change to kind of make the characters glow a little bit, so it was more obvious that you could interact with them. On the feedback, as you can see, majority really positive feedback. Only 11 people said they didn't enjoy the game. That is actually amazing when it comes to games, because if you imagine someone that plays Candy Crush versus someone that plays Fortnite versus Pokemon Go, games are very subjective and the type of games you enjoy varies a lot. So it was really good to see the majority positive feedback on that one. The page engagement is a huge one for us at the end. So 93% of people who made it to that finish line continued on to explore this page where you can see all the tools and the products. So we didn't get much drop off at the end, which is amazing. And then 46% of those engaged with the page CTAs. So that's the links that go on to teach them more information. Although it was 46%, we actually had 23% of them click to replay the game. Also positive, although we do want to make sure people are getting to the information, it does show that the game's enjoyable and that people want to play it again. And the interesting one for us was 3.2 minutes average gameplay. That is really long compared to any of our other journeys, and it showed that we can sustain engagement for a long period of time as long as it's something interactive and it's something engaging. So what I'll do, I will pop the QR code up on the screen should anyone wish to play it. We can also share a link in the chat after and share the QR code as well. And then the final thing that we just wanted to share, sorry that this is two QR codes at once, but if you want to take a picture or anything, feel free, is our LinkedIn. So you've got mine, Myred's, and Lily's. If you want to connect with us, if you're interested about what we're doing, if you want to get involved with anything, like I said, we're running a lot of events with Ada Scotland. So if you're in Scotland and you want to come to any of those, please do just get in touch. I think that's it from me. I will stop sharing my screen so we can answer any questions.
Right, thanks very much. Yeah, it was super interesting to see everything that's gone into the design and the sort of thinking behind how to create the game and kind of the direction you've taken in. We've got quite a few questions coming in, and we've got just over 10 minutes to try and get through as many of them as we can. So we'll just get started. And if anybody has got any questions, just pop them in the Q&A, and we'll try and get to those before we wrap up. So just to start off with, you'd mentioned at the beginning the gap between men and women's pensions. I think it was about £113,000. Cheryl's asked, how does the game change the financial behaviours of players, and do you have any data on how people or how players of the game have improved their financial situation, or maybe changed their behaviour after playing the game?
Couple of stories. I think stories are really powerful because they're so human, and they go alongside the data that Rose shared. So there's two stories that stand out in my mind. One was from an older woman who attended an event we were at down in London. And actually, she, after playing the game, had been inspired to go away and not only talk to her daughter and daughters-in-law about their future finances, but also her granddaughter too, which I think for me is really special because there's such a power in that intergenerational conversation, especially amongst women in this stuff. The more that we can have conversations across generations, the more likelihood we are to really make a positive change. The other one was a story from a woman who had not long returned from maternity leave, and actually after interacting with the game and the content, she took out her first investing product, something that she had been considering for a while but had lacked the confidence to do. And actually the game and the associated content gave her that boost to actually take the action.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, I think the confidence in knowing what decision to make is definitely something that slows me down when it comes to financial planning, because there's so many options. It's hard to know. You don't want to put your money in the wrong place.
Yeah. Taking that first step is it's a lot.
Yeah. So we've got another question here from Yana. So Yana's saying that she works she's a games UX researcher, and is kind of wandering around the gamification side of things. I'm just wondering if there was any research or kind of data that you found around whether the target audience you were kind of targeting, kind of women, whether the gaming side of things was going to speak to them, whether it was exclusive for women, and whether it wouldn't speak to them.
I can take this one if you would like. Hello, Yana. That's a fab question. So right back at the start of the games and gamification venture, we had to come up with like a bit of a framework around how we were going to do games and gamification. And actually, it still drives how we ideate to this day. So within gamification, it lays out that there are 8 motivators, and at least one of those has to be present in order to drive behavior change, because this is what we're doing here with gamification. We're using gamification in order to drive positive behavior change. So what we have done specifically for our financial services context is go, what are the motivators that are really relevant for us? So for example, ownership is one that is important. So something that you own, seeing it improve, seeing it get bigger, seeing it get better. Whereas scarcity and impatience is one that we're not going to lean into, because if people are already feeling a bit anxious about their money and the decisions that they should make, rushing them and making them feel like there is scarcity is actually going to exacerbate those feelings. So scarcity, for example, you could maybe see that popping up in like Ticketmaster when it says, oh, there's only one ticket left. And usually there's not only one ticket left. When it comes to the specific audience that we were designing the game for in this instance, so that would be women, what we do is we take those motivators into usually an ideation workshop. And we decide that for this particular audience, we're going to dial up these motivators, and we're really going to dial down these motivators because of what we know about that particular audience. And we base all of our design decisions around that. But then as you're a researcher, you'll know this, we have to validate that, right? So we've got an amazing games and gamification researcher, Amy. what she does is she takes the games out to moderated and unmoderated research, like multiple times, and we'll get the feedback, we'll make the changes, we'll get the feedback, we'll make the changes until we're super confident that this is right, this is going to resonate well with our audience.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So then we've got one from Bettina who's asking, it's really interesting to see the creativity and gamification being adopted by a major banking group and an exciting app tackling an important problem. As a lecturer in interaction design, we always encourage students to be curious, creative and playful, but they don't always see it as a serious part of their career or job pathway. Can you talk a wee bit about any internal discussions or decision making about the more pragmatic or practical app design versus the creative and playful innovation side?
I think I could probably start off and then I could probably pass over to Rose, actually, because you mentioned abstraction at one point, and I think that there's a really important point to be made about abstraction. So I've completely blanked what the question was. I'm so sorry.
Sorry. If you could talk a wee bit more about any internal discussions that you had around or decision making around the kind of pragmatic side and the creative side.
So one of the principles that we follow in experience design for Lloyds is called bringing the outside in, because actually as soon as you get really caught up in what you're doing internally within your own space, so only just looking for inspiration within the company you're working for, that's when that sort of innovation and creativity starts to really stall. So we are very much encouraged to look outward and not just at other companies and organizations that are within the financial services sector, for example, even wider than that. So one of the most successful pieces of design that we've delivered in 2025 was actually inspired by mindfulness apps like Headspace and Calm. Because we realized that the feelings people were bringing to mindfulness apps were really similar to the feelings people were bringing to worries about money. And at one point, we also drew inspiration from the British road sign system. It's a system that is really effective in navigation, has been effectively unchanged for 70 years. So some of your best ideas that are going to be the most effective with your customers actually are probably going to come from incredibly unlikely places.
Right, thanks very much.
I'll just add a little bit on the abstraction point. So we're trying something really new, and it's not like every time we've gone for a really out there idea, everyone has loved it off the bat, because that's never going to happen, right? When you're trying to think out the box. So one of the games that we're going to release soon is actually aimed at a younger audience, and it's based in space, and you're making decisions about your budget, right, to teach them about the 50-30-20 rule. And what we actually did is we took that to research in different levels of abstraction. So one was you're in work and you're managing your budget, and it's very literal. The next one up was, okay, you're working in a coffee shop and you're managing that budget, and that they kind of got increasingly more abstract. The one that really resonated with people was the space one, because it feels removed, but it's still teaching you something. And we've tested this with 16-year-olds, and they've been arguing in the room about, whether they should save money for their spaceship because they don't know what's going to happen next. And it brings up really good conversations. So I think having research is a really good one for when people are a little bit unsure, to kind of bring them up to speed. Because I know someone mentioned in the last question Lily answered about kind of like demographics and age groups. So one of the things we're doing at the minute is trying to think about mini games pointed to specific age groups, but then testing them with that age group, because then that gives you the data to back it up. Okay, this is a good idea. It's not just a good idea from us. It's resonating with people. So yeah, I think it's a balance of being innovative and then trying to back it up.
And you've kind of touched on a question we got in from Ross, who said he was surprised to hear the size of the gaming team at Lloyds. And I think you mentioned it was maybe 20 people in the team. You touched on a couple of them there, I suppose, Rose, but are there any other games in the Lloyds kind of portfolio that people might have heard of or could play?
Yes, so as Lily said, we have one of the teams has got an external website, so it's www.powerup.scottishwidows.co.uk. They're accessible to everyone. On there, we've got 2 games built with Unity. The other one is called Ace the Trace, and it's to help people understand pension tracing. So that's another kind of Unity one. And then there's a few other gamified journeys on there that people can go and enjoy as well. And then the other part of the team that me and MyRed look after build gamified journeys in the Scottish Widows app. So they're more around kind of like Duolingo style educational journeys. So you need to be a Scottish Widows customer at the minute to be able to access those. But I think we've got about 15 now, maybe, MyRed, that we've worked on.
Yeah, all together. We also do like seasonal campaigns which pop up at key points in the year, like tax year end, to try and help get away from like myths or perceptions people have, like tax year end is only important for people on really high salaries, and really try and inspire action, even if it's just a small thing, because a small thing can actually make a big difference in the future. But if you have got a Scottish Widows product, by the way, please download the app, and then you'll be able to get into some of what Rose has been describing.
Maybe we can pop a link to was it Power Up you said? We can maybe pop a link to that in the chat, and I'll send it in an email after the session as well, so people can have a little look and see the ones that aren't exclusive to Scottish Widows customers. But yeah, unfortunately we've run out of time. So thank you to the 3 of you for joining and chatting about the game and kind of the impact it's had. And thank you everybody who's tuned in to listen. We have recorded the session today, so afterwards we'll make a recording available and we'll send a link round in case you want to rewatch any of it. But otherwise, thanks again to MyRed, Rose, and Lily for joining, and see you next time.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
See ya.